Why is it that you can't seem to stick to a diet anymore, even though you have in the past? So now it feels like you keep failing at something you feel like you should be able to do. I'm Sarah and I'm a psychotherapist, and I want to share some reasons with you about why this might be, from neurobiology to psychology, and also including dopamine. And dopamine's an interesting one as we're learning more about this cheeky little neurotransmitter. It could be that dopamine was the very thing that enabled you to diet and lose weight in the past, and the very thing that stops you from doing it now. I share these reasons in the hope that it might help you to make more sense of what it is that you're going through. I'm not here to preach at you or tell you what it is you should do. But let's start with number one. And the first one is that perhaps your primal brain has become less forgiving. Our primal brain is located in the base, and it's the part of our brain that controls our survival instincts. So our appetite drive is there. Now, when we decide to try to adhere to a diet, we are trying to make decisions about what to eat from the front of our brain here. And we ignore our primal brain and what our primal brain might be telling us because we're trying to stick to the rules of this diet. And this creates some stress for the primal brain, especially if the primal brain registers that there is an energy deficit going on, because the primal brain thinks that there isn't enough food. We know that our experiences that we go through in life changes our brains. We see that in trauma. A lot of the trauma responses in the brain are the brain's attempt to protect us, even if it doesn't always work. And so it's the same then with dieting, is your primal brain will ramp up those signals to get you to eat. It also believes that you live in a feast-famine world. And this is especially true if you're someone who goes into dieting, then binging, dieting, and then binging. When you stay in that cycle, it keeps confirming to the primal brain over and over again, food is unreliable. We need to make this person think about food a lot, and then food obsession sinks in. And then we get stressed because we're thinking about food all the time. And the only time that food obsession and nagging voice about eating goes away is when we're actually eating. So then we find ourselves eating to shut that up. And this point links me on to the next point, which is the idea of set point theory. You might have heard of this. It's this theory that there is a weight range that our bodies feel safe and comfortable in. And if we try to push our weight down below that, we call that weight suppression. Again, the primal brain kicks off and it starts telling us to eat, eat, eat. The theory also goes that the more you diet, the more times you lose weight, especially, but not only, if you become weight suppressed. The brain resets your weight set point higher than it was before. This theory helps to explain why one of the biggest predictors of weight gain is dieting itself. I've worked with many people in their 50s and 60s who will say, I wish I understood this stuff earlier. I would have stopped dieting much sooner, because this resonates with their experience. It might not resonate with yours, that's fine. I've got a few more to offer. And then the next one is the balance of the reward system. So we know that food is rewarding. When we eat food, our brain rewards us, and dopamine plays a role in that. Now, dopamine is sometimes just thought of as, it's our brain gives us dopamine when we do something pleasurable, but actually it's a reinforcing neurotransmitter. It wants to reinforce behaviors that are rewarding. So we know food is rewarding, but we also know how rewarding weight loss can feel. So when you're in that role, when you're in the swing of it sometimes, you might have experienced this where it's like you're just in the flow, you're following your diet, and each week that scale is going down and you're delighted. Every time you think about your weight going down, your brain gives you a lovely little burst of dopamine. It's going, doesn't this feel good? Keep at it, we like this. Many people, when they decide to lose weight, they have a goal in mind about the weight that they want to be. So then one of two things happens when they reach that weight. Now, I've heard many stories of people who will tell me they hit their goal weight and they've never been at their goal weight for longer than a day, because the minute they hit their goal weight, the compulsive eating starts, sometimes on the same day. When they hit their goal weight, there is an immediate shift in the reward system. The brain's like, oh, we're done. We've done it, yay. So what's the motivation to continue it, to go into what most people or a lot of diets prescribe, this idea of maintenance? So a lot of people know I can't just diet and then go back to doing whatever I want. Quite often there's a continuation of some level of control, top-down control needed to maintain. But here's the other thing that might happen. Is people get to their goal weight and they feel like, oh, it's not enough. And so they move the goalposts And so the dopamine, or the reward system, is still kicking in, it's still working, they keep going further and further. These are the people who will then take restriction into a pretty unhealthy place. And now we're moving into the realms of eating disorders, is because it becomes more rewarding to chase the weight loss than the reward of being able to eat these foods freely. So if you have found that you've done this sustained period of weight loss that has felt really good, and then there's been a switch at some point, your brain has perceived that the reward of eating more is greater than the reward of continuing to pursue weight loss. And this is not happening in your conscious brain. Maybe for some people it is, but for a lot of us, this is going on outside of our awareness. And for the fourth one, I want to talk about our dear friend, stress. So we know that stress has an impact on our appetite. For some people it makes them eat more, for some people it makes them eat less. The general pattern that the majority of people fall into is that low or mid-level chronic stress tends to lead to eating more, but big spikes of very high stress can often wipe out the appetite for a little bit. So you might have a memory of your body at a certain size that perhaps you experienced it because of a stressful event. I know people who have gone through cancer and have lost a lot of weight, and then they've recovered and they still pine for that smaller body size. They have a memory of what it felt like, and because they've experienced that, there's something in them saying, I should be able to experience it again, despite the fact it was very stressful situations that created that body size. Another friend of mine went through a horrible divorce and lost a lot of weight in a very short period of time. Everyone was fawning all over her, telling her how wonderful she looked, at a time when she was feeling particularly vulnerable. And even now, years later, I see her striving to get back to that, because she thinks, because she was there once before, that it is possible. But the only thing that made it possible was the chronic stress. And on the flip side of that, maybe you have a memory of a time when your eating just felt really regulated, or you were dieting, or whatever it was, you just thought that your eating was as you wanted it. And actually, when you look at that period in your life, there was a lot of other things were pretty good. Maybe you didn't have the same responsibilities that you have now. Maybe you've become a parent since then. Maybe life has just worn you down in the way that it does to a lot of us as we get older. Maybe there's health concerns. And so I think it's easy, if you've had that experience, to look back at that time in your life and go, gosh, when I was eating like that, I felt so much better. Life was so much better. And the brain can kind of conflate that with, the reason I felt so good and life was so much easier was because of how I was eating, as opposed to that was an easier period of life, which then created an easier time with food. And the fifth point that I want to make about this is around the psychology piece. And if you're someone who has felt out of control around food and that's been really distressing, and then you've managed to kind of adhere to a diet or a way of eating, maybe you've cut something out, maybe you're following a diet, and to begin with, because you have these rules and parameters, it's like, I feel like I can relax. I don't have to make all these decisions around food because I put these rules in, and that kind of takes care of the decision making. And the challenge with this one is, when or if those rules break, you've got nothing to hold on to, because you haven't developed the skill of how to negotiate with yourself about food. And a healthy relationship with food means being able to negotiate with ourselves about it. And what I mean by that is, we have different parts of us that want different things. We might have a part of us that wants to sit on the sofa and eat some chocolate. And we might have a part of us that's going, I really want to prioritize these nutritious foods because I want to support my long-term health. And the thing is, in order for a negotiation to work, for two parts, maybe more parts, 3 or 4 parts, that all want different things, to come to some kind of peaceful compromise, is these parts have to be friendly. So let's say you and a good friend, you want to go and see a movie. And one of you wants to see one movie and one of you wants to see another movie. Now, if you're good friends and you get on, one of you is going to go, okay, let's see your movie. And then the other friend, if they're in an amiable mood, they'll go, okay, well then why don't you choose where we go for dinner? So in order for the relationship between parts to be balanced, it's like sometimes this part gets to make the decision, and sometimes this part goes, actually, you had this the other day and today we're going to do this. But this only works if we're not turning it into a war with ourselves. And because people feel so stressed about this stuff, it's so important to them, and it's so linked with how they feel about themselves and maybe fears for their health and all kinds of things, that trying to have a friendly negotiation is extremely challenging. And I don't want to oversimplify it. But a lot of the things that I've shared are things that are outside of our control. But this learning how to have these healthy negotiations with ourselves about what, when, and how we eat, that's a place where we can develop a skill that will support us as we're trying to navigate this relationship with food and our health and our bodies. I have a couple of videos where I go into this, like how to negotiate with yourself around food, and I will link to them at the end, although I think rumor on the street is that YouTube is getting rid of the end screen where we can point and recommend videos, so if it's not at the end, you can have a look below. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do, what they should be doing, and I know that frustrates people because on YouTube it's like, well, you've told us these 5 things, why aren't you telling us what to do about all of them? And if you think it might be for you, you might want to come and join me in one of my Connect and Recover groups, which is 8 of us. We get together for a couple of hours and we explore what it is that's going on for us with food and what we might need for our next steps. And it's a very individual and collective process, as in I'm not there telling you exactly what to do, because that doesn't work. There's so many people out there giving advice, and there's no advice that's going to fit everybody. So I just want to offer this stuff to you and allow you to come to your own conclusions about what it means for you. Anyway, I hope that was helpful, and I will see you on the next video.